A tough start to the battle for Ramadi. This is Skywatch TV News, May 27th, 2015. I'm Derek Gilbert. Iraqi government forces have surrounded the capital of Anbar province about 70 miles west of Baghdad. However, suicide bombers from the Islamic State have carried out a wave of attacks on military convoys intended to supply those troops. Some 55 people have died over the last couple of days. The U.S. is launching airstrikes into Ramadi, and many of the targets are those abandoned U.S. military vehicles supplied to the Iraqi army and left behind when the Iraqi army fled the city. This isn't the first time we've had to destroy our own hardware. American fighter jets and drones reportedly destroyed $3 to $4 million worth of Humvees, MRAPs, which are mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, and other equipment between August and October of 2014. And the military website DefenseTech.com reported in January of this year that American airstrikes had destroyed, as of that date, 184 Humvees, 58 tanks, and nearly 700 other vehicles. An unknown number of Humvees and M1A1 Abrams tanks were captured by ISIS when they rolled into Iraq last summer. In Syria, government forces have begun withdrawing from a major air base in the eastern part of the country. That was Bashar Assad's last military stronghold in eastern Syria. His last base for launching airstrikes against ISIS in northeastern Syria and into Anbar province. In the last week, Syrian government troops have abandoned 3 major air bases, and military experts say that ISIS now has the power to isolate and separate northern, central, and eastern Syria from the capital of Damascus. It also strips key air support away from Syrian troops that are fighting rebels and ISIS in the Kalamun Mountains, which is the border region between Syria and Lebanon. And meanwhile, it appears that ISIS is preparing to invade Jordan. ISIS forces advanced from the city of Palmyra in Syria, which they captured last week, to the Jordanian border, the border region between Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. Now, Jordan had reinforced its border by positioning troops along its northern border with Syria, but this is in the eastern part of the country, which is relatively undefended. And some 800,000 Syrian refugees are in the Jordanian town of Ar-Ruwayshid, just inside the border. So an invasion, according to experts, may be imminent, and this may force the hand of President Obama, who so far has resisted committing American troops to this fight. However, the United States has some 7,000 special operations troops and an Air Force unit based in Jordan. Now, yesterday, I said that the West's approach to this mess in Syria and Iraq made no sense, and I guess when you try to figure it out through natural eyes, it's not going to make sense. But as the Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, Ephesians chapter 6, our wrestling match is not against human opponents, but against principalities and powers and rulers of spiritual darkness, literal supernatural entities, evil entities that seek to do us harm. So in looking at things through a biblical lens, the picture comes into some clearer focus. It appears that these forces, these dark powers, would like a major conflict in the heartland of the Middle East. In fact, these lying spirits appear to have convinced the leadership of ISIS, as we've talked about, that a prophesied war in the Syrian town of Dabiq along the Turkish border must take place, at which time their savior, the Mahdi, will return and lead them ultimately to global victorious jihad. Now, there may be other prophetic fulfillments on the horizon as well. For example, Isaiah chapter 17 describes the destruction of the city of Damascus. And the way the battle inside Syria is going, unless the Syrian government turns things around soon, ISIS may soon have the power to make that happen. Now factor this in. The president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, gave a speech just a few days ago in which he called for the conquest, basically, a Muslim conquest of Jerusalem. That speech was echoed by his Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu. Now take a look at this Bible atlas. I was raised on prophecy as interpreted by Hal Lindsey, that the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38 would be led by a coalition from the uttermost north, meaning Russia. In our context, there's nothing really further north than Russia, and at the height of the Cold War, casting Russia as the forces of Antichrist was a pretty popular idea. Now, the uttermost north in the context of the biblical writers, however, was actually a little closer to Israel. It was understood by the Bible writers that the uttermost north referred to the domain, the location of the palace of Baal. Baal Zephon, Lord of the North, Mount Zephon, known to the ancients as Mount Casios, known to us today as Mount Acra. It's in the northern part of Syria, just a few miles south of the border with Turkey, on the Mediterranean coast. That was the location of Baal's palace. So a coalition of forces coming from the uttermost north, which was the traditional direction that enemies would invade Israel, could include, well, according to Ezekiel 38, it does include Magog, Tubal, Meshech, Togarmah, Gomer, and you see all of those nations here on this atlas as inside modern-day Turkey. Now, given that Persia, Iran, is also mentioned as part of this coalition in Ezekiel 38, and given that Iran and Turkey are not exactly allies, Iran is Shia, Turkey is Sunni, and that Cush and Put are also part of the coalition. That would be Ethiopia and Libya. While Israel's next-door neighbors, such as Egypt and Syria, are not mentioned in Ezekiel 38, means that we may not be seeing a preliminary to the Gog-Magog war. Something else would have to occur first that would draw together Sunni and Shia, Persian and Turk, Arab and African into a single coalition. Something like what our friend Bill Salas writes about in his Psalm 83 war. So again, what we may be seeing here, while not necessarily the preliminary to the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38, is at least an alignment of geopolitical forces that make such a war imaginable. Call them birth pangs. And we'll keep watching. In Israel last night, the Air Force there launched drone strikes, or rather launched airstrikes against 4 targets in the Gaza Strip after 5 rockets were launched inside southern Israel. No casualties on either side. Israeli media says that infighting between Palestinian groups may have led to the rockets being launched without the permission of Hamas, the ruling authority in the Gaza Strip. Science news. Biologists have created human yeast, strains of yeast incorporating human DNA. They say this may lead to testing therapies for disease-related mutations in the human genome without having to test those therapies on human subjects first. Legal news, Canada is struggling with how to implement its new assisted suicide law. In February, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled 9-0 that adults in grievous, unending pain have a right, a legal right, to end their life with a doctor's help. Roman Catholic bishops in Canada are concerned, and they're asking Parliament to consult with them on how to implement the law, saying that there's an urgent need to protect healthcare workers from being compelled to provide or participate in physician-assisted suicide. And as I've been saying on this program, this is the real issue. This is the real point of contention over Religious Freedom Restoration Act laws like the one that was so controversial in Indiana recently. You see, the issue is not whether florists or bakers or photographers should be compelled to provide services for gay weddings. It's whether medical professionals have a right to object conscientiously to being compelled to end a human life. The logical end of this is that medical professionals in Canada and perhaps soon in the United States may be forced to choose between their conscience and their career. Speaking of healthcare, we learned today that last fall, during the height of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, 12 more people were hospitalized in the Dallas area with Ebola-like symptoms than we were told about. Now, you may remember that 2 nurses, Amber Vinson and Nina Pham, contracted the disease after coming into contact with Liberian native Thomas Eric Duncan, who later died of Ebola. What we didn't know until this week was that 12 other people, 9 of them healthcare workers, were hospitalized with fevers, headaches, nausea, abdominal pain, vomiting, or diarrhea. All were hospitalized for a couple of days, tested negative, and ultimately sent home. But again, the information was not made public until this week. Last night on Skywatch TV, Steve Quayle joined Tom Horn to talk about his new book, Little Creatures, a fascinating discussion of things like elves and fairies and imps and goblins, and underlying truth behind where those creatures originate, and the fact that they're not really friendly, as depicted in the fairy tales we remember from childhood. If you missed that discussion last night, you can see it here on the website. We'll have that interview archived ultimately at skywatchtv.com and at our official YouTube channel. But if you have a Roku account and a Roku box attached to your television set, you can watch that program and these daily updates on demand, day or night, at your convenience. If you haven't yet added the Skywatch TV channel to your Roku account, instructions on how to do so are located at our website, skywatchtv.com/Roku. I don't know if you can hear that noise in the background, but you can hear construction going on here at the Skywatch TV offices. It's always a whirlwind of activity. And we'll show you a couple of pictures here from last week as we began shipping out the books ordered during the special promotion for the new book, On the Path of the Immortals by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. We brought in some local high school students looking to make a few extra dollars on their summer vacation, and this is the result. Boxes, boxes everywhere. If you're still waiting for your shipment of the special package, which included the previous books by Tom and Chris, Exo Vaticana and Petrus Romanus, the excellent book What Lies Beyond, and a couple of other books as a special bonus, as well as the Ahriman Gate audiobook narrated by yours truly. If you're still waiting on that, we appreciate your patience. We are shipping them out as fast as we can, as you can tell. But just wanted to give you a look at what happens when Tom Horn gets a bright idea about a special promotion for a new book release. The stories we discuss here on these daily updates are generally posted at our Facebook page, where you can log on and keep up to date with what's happening in the news. We also appreciate your feedback on those stories. And if you're there at our Facebook page, give us a like if you're so inclined. And I do appreciate your feedback as well on how I can make this report informative as well as interesting on a daily basis. Different types of stories, length of the program. Appreciate your feedback. You can send that to me at dgilbert@skywatchtv.com. We thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.